Hey everyone! Tonight we're not sailing across seas or blasting into space. We're going somewhere even more strange and profound, back through the layers of time itself, into a world that feels both familiar and entirely alien. We're going to meet the humans who came before us. Picture this. You're standing on the arid banks of a vast, glittering lake. It's not a place you'd ever find on a modern atlas. This is Lake Turkana, 2 million years in the past. The sun beats down sharper, brighter, more relentless than you've ever felt, and the sky glows an impossibly pure shade of blue, empty of contrails. Far away, dormant volcanoes blur the horizon, and the air is filled not with gasoline or mown grass, but with the dry tang of dust, the metallic taste of volcanic stone, and the earthy musk of strange plants. Colossal elephants with downward curved tusks splash in the shallows. A bird you can't name lets out a piercing call across the water. This is the cradle of humanity, and you are standing right in its nursery. Then you notice movement along the shoreline. A small band is gathered among the reeds. At first glance, they look uncannily like us, upright figures on two legs, their dark shapes etched against the glare of the afternoon. But as you focus, the differences stand out. The male in front lifts his head, his forehead slopes low, heavy brow ridges shadow his deep-set eyes, his jaw juts forward, and there's no chin. His arms are too long, his legs too short. He's not an ape, but not a modern human either. He belongs to another branch of our family tree, one that has long since vanished. These are the ones who laid the foundation stones of our story. Over the next 2 million years, their descendants will spark one of the greatest adventures life has ever known. They'll strike stone against stone, unlocking the hidden potential of tools, the first human technology. They'll battle their fear of the night until fire becomes their shield, their gathering place, their light. They'll push out of Africa, driven by shifting climates and endless curiosity, scattering across Asia and Europe. Their bodies will change, their minds will adapt. New species will appear. Hunters, sculpted for the Ice Age, mysterious ghost populations revealed only through fragments of DNA, and even tiny, island-dwelling humans who hunted dwarf elephants like characters out of myth. But here's the question. Who were these other people, these alternative experiments in humanity? Why did they thrive for so long, only to disappear, leaving us as the last ones left to wonder? And what do their long rise and sudden silence really say about what it means to be human? Thanks to generations of paleontologists sifting through dust and stone, we can now start piecing together this lost world. Tonight, we'll walk through it together. And just to be honest, if you were actually dropped here without a time machine, you wouldn't last an afternoon. A saber-toothed cat would have you for dinner before you figured out which way was north. So before we dive in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you really value this kind of content. That tiny click sends a huge signal to the algorithm that long-form, thoughtful history still matters. And for me, it's an incredible gesture of support. Thank you for helping keep this channel alive. I always love to hear where you're watching from. So tell me in the comments what part of the world you're in and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a gentle hum, and let's step together into tonight's journey. The Crucible of our creation. Before we can truly meet the players, we need to understand the stage. This story doesn't begin with people, or even pre-people. It begins with Earth itself. Long before the first hominins stood upright, the planet was already shaping the conditions that would one day produce us. Continents drifted at the pace your fingernails grow, colliding in slow-motion crashes that raised mountain ranges. The climate swung hot and cold, glaciers creeping down from the poles and retreating again, locking and releasing oceans in cycles that reshaped weather everywhere. This was change on a scale almost impossible to comprehend, forces vast enough to set evolution's stage. And in one corner of the world, these forces created a perfect laboratory for life to experiment, a crucible where ape-like ancestors would be remade into humans. That place was Africa, and its beating heart was the Great Rift Valley. Stretching for thousands of miles from the Middle East down to Mozambique, the rift is, in essence, a continent ripping itself apart in geological slow motion. For millions of years, molten forces deep underground have been pulling the Somali plate away from the rest of Africa, stretching the crust like soft taffy. Huge blocks of land dropped down into valleys, while magma rose to the surface, building volcanoes that poured lava and ash, piling up giants like Kilimanjaro. You're walking through a landscape under permanent construction, but this violent geology was exactly what made it a furnace for evolution. The rift didn't create one kind of habitat. It made dozens, crammed tightly side by side. On one slope you'd find dense green forests, on the other side dry scrubland. Down in the basin, rivers fed long, narrow lakes, bordered by woodlands, marshes, and savanna. Within a single day's walk, a creature could move from jungle to open plain to swamp. And if one habitat failed, another lay just beyond the ridge. This ever-shifting mosaic was the perfect engine of change. Populations got isolated, challenged, reshaped, and tested. And that constant trial by environment produced an explosion of new forms. For scientists, it's a dream. Because while most creatures vanish without a trace, the Rift Valley's lakes and ash made preservation possible. An animal dying near water might be buried quickly in silt, protecting its bones. Then an eruption would blanket the land in volcanic ash. That ash carried tiny radioactive isotopes, a built-in clock. By measuring potassium and argon in its layers, researchers can date events with astonishing precision. So when a fossil skeleton turns up beneath a sheet of ash dated to 3.2 million years ago, we know exactly where it belongs in the timeline. That's the bedrock of our entire story, the scientific evidence that lets us speak for those who never could. The Rift Valley is a time machine written in stone, with the bones of our ancestors pressed between its ancient pages. And what a story those pages tell. As you walk through this prehistoric world, the wildlife is at once recognizable and otherworldly. Herds of zebra and antelope roam the plains, but the hunters stalking them are predators you've only seen behind glass in museums. A saber-toothed cat, Dinophilis, prowls through the tall grass, its oversized fangs half hidden behind curled lips. You keep your distance from the rivers, not only for crocodiles, but for something stranger still, an enormous beast that looks almost like an elephant, yet isn't. This is a Dinotherium, a towering creature with downward curving tusks sprouting from its lower jaw, likely used to strip bark from trees. Troops of massive baboons, some the size of gorillas, forage noisily in the woodlands, far more intimidating than the baboons you know today. The air is alive with the sounds of this vanished world, a reminder that in this age our ancestors were not rulers, but just another species struggling to see the next sunrise. One of the most remarkable chapters in this story lies in Tanzania, in a place now called Olduvai Gorge. A deep canyon carved into the plains, it exposes nearly 2 million years of geological and human history. Sometimes called the Grand Canyon of Prehistory, it was discovered almost by accident. In 1911, a German butterfly collector named Wilhelm Kattwinkel was chasing specimens when he nearly stumbled off a cliff. As he caught his balance, he noticed fossils eroding from the gorge walls. That chance moment changed the course of paleoanthropology forever. But even with such a perfect stage, scientists still debate whether the Rift Valley's shifting environments were the true spark of human evolution. Was it this geological crucible, volcanoes, earthquakes, and ever-changing landscapes that forced our ancestors upright and sharpened their minds? Or was it larger global climate cycles reshaping the entire planet, with the Rift Valley merely preserving the evidence? The argument continues. What is certain, however, is that in this raw, violent, and beautiful land, the first actors in the human story took their first steps. The Australopithecines, walking into the future. Here appear our earliest true forebears, not yet of the genus Homo, but part of a diverse and successful family known as the Australopithecines, literally southern apes. For decades, they were seen as little more than odd apes. Their brains were small, their faces jutted forward, and their long arms marked them as climbers. Yet they carried within them a single revolutionary trait that set them on a new path: bipedalism, walking on two legs. It was the first unmistakable fork in the road, a clear break from the lineage that led to modern chimpanzees. For years their evidence was fragmentary, a tooth here, a bit of jaw there, little more than whispers in stone. That changed on a hot November day in 1974, when American paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson, working in Ethiopia's Hadar region, spotted a small fragment of arm bone on the ground. Then another, then another. His team began excavating and soon unearthed a 40% complete skeleton of a female Australopithecine who lived 3.2 million years ago. That night, back at camp, a tape deck played Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Her name was sealed into history. Lucy was the first fossil complete enough to show us, in vivid detail, what our ancestors really looked like. Lucy was small, barely 3.5 feet tall, weighing around 60 pounds. Her upper body was ape-like, long arms, powerful shoulders, curved fingers perfect for climbing. The trees still offered her food and safety, but her lower body told a different story. Her pelvis was short and bowl-shaped, like ours, not the long blade of a chimpanzee. Her thigh bones angled inward at the knee, placing her feet under her center of gravity, an elegant adaptation for walking upright. Lucy was made to walk. 4 years later, in Tanzania, came the final proof. Mary Leakey's team uncovered fossilized footprints in a layer of volcanic ash at Latoli, preserved for 3.6 million years. They reveal a clear heel strike, the arch rolling forward, and a strong push-off from the big toe, lined up with the rest of the foot, not splayed like an ape's. This was the smoking gun. These beings walked upright with a modern stride long before Homo existed. Bipedalism was the foundation stone of humanity, the first domino to fall. Why it happened is still argued. Maybe it was to see over tall grass, to cool the body, or most likely to free the hands, for carrying food, tools, or children. Whatever the reason, it set everything else in motion. Picture Lucy and her kin, small groups moving through the rift's patchwork of forest and savanna, foraging fruits, nuts, seeds, and scavenged meat. They were constantly alert, knowing they were prey. Trees offered refuge, but the ground offered opportunity. Their strange new way of moving, on two legs, was the risky gamble that would eventually change the world. For 1 million years, Australopithecines thrived in this delicate balance. But the Earth itself was changing. The Savannah hypothesis, a world in flux. Around 3 million years ago, the planet began to cool. Ice grew at the poles, locking away water in massive sheets. The air dried, rains failed, and Africa's great forests began to retreat. In their place spread wide, golden grasslands. The Savannah had arrived. Here was a new world, and with it, new challenges. The scattered trees no longer offered easy refuge. The game had changed. Survival now favored those who could travel far across open plains, spotting predators, working together, and seizing new sources of food. like the great herds of grazing animals. This shift inspired one of the most elegant ideas in anthropology, the Savannah hypothesis. It argued that the spread of grasslands pushed our ancestors further toward endurance, intelligence, cooperation, and eventually meat-eating. The savannah became a crucible, forging the traits that define us today. But this was no gentle change. It was an unforgiving test. Lineages that were too tied to the shrinking forests vanished forever. Others adapted, carrying forward the experiment of being human. Out of that struggle came us. With every extinction, a new chance arises. The struggles of life on the savannah carved out a fresh adaptive stage, a brand new set of challenges that demanded a different kind of intelligence to overcome. This ecological crucible forced a decision: adjust, move on, or vanish. Out of this relentless, unforgiving filter, a new branch of hominin was on the verge of appearing, one with a slightly larger brain and a groundbreaking concept of what could be achieved with a simple stone. We understand this dramatic transition from woodland to grassland through ingenious science. Researchers drilled into the seabed off the coast of Africa, extracting long cylinders of sediment that had been building up layer by layer for millions of years. These sediment cores are like time machines. Inside them, scientists examined two essential markers. The first was fossil pollen carried from the continent by wind. Under a microscope, forest pollen looks different from grassland pollen. By comparing the ratios, they could reconstruct the vegetation of different eras. The second was the dust itself. Its chemical fingerprint revealed how dry the land had been. The story hidden in those deep-sea cores is crystal clear. Africa shifted dramatically from a wet, forested environment to a cooler, drier, grass-filled one, right at the turning point in our history. But the truth wasn't a simple, endless ocean of grass. This ancient environment was patchy, a mosaic. Broad open plains stretched far, but rivers cut across them, lined with dense forests. Lakes and wetlands dotted the landscape, forming pockets of life amid the aridity. This detail is vital because it means our ancestors didn't abandon the trees all at once. They could retreat to woodland enclaves while venturing onto the plains. This complexity still fuels scientific debate. Many researchers now argue against the classic Savannah hypothesis and instead point toward the variability selection model. This idea suggests it wasn't just the shift to grasslands, but the increasingly unstable climate itself that drove evolution. Periods swung dramatically from wet to dry, and survival depended not on being specialized, but on being flexible. The winners were the adaptable, the ones with bigger, more versatile brains, capable of adjusting on the spot, shifting diets, and inventing strategies in an unpredictable world. The evolutionary pressure was not to be a grassland specialist, but a problem solver. And a new problem solver was about to arrive. Homo habilis, the handyman. Under the blistering sun of Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, two names became inseparable from its dust. From the 1930s onward, Louis and Mary Leakey spent decades combing those rugged slopes, convinced that the origins of humanity lay buried in that slice of the Rift Valley. They endured scorching heat, choking dust storms, and the constant frustration of scattered, incomplete finds. But they persisted, driven by one aim: to find the maker of the thousands of stone tools littering the site. For years, the toolmaker was a phantom. Then, in the early 1960s, everything changed. Their son Jonathan uncovered the fossil remains of a new type of hominin. Unlike the heavy-jawed Australopithecines found before, this skull showed a larger, rounder brain case. A lower jaw revealed smaller, more delicate teeth. Most strikingly, the hand bones suggested a precision grip, the ability to hold a hammerstone in one hand and a core in the other, striking with intent. The Leakeys pieced the clues together. Here was a creature with a bigger brain, more human-like teeth and dexterous hands, found alongside the very tools they sought to explain. Their conclusion sent shockwaves through science. This was the toolmaker, a direct ancestor of humanity. And because of its intimate link with technology, they named it Homo habilis, handy man. This was a bold, even radical claim. At the time, the genus Homo was reserved for large-brained hominins like Neanderthals and modern humans. To admit this small, primitive being into the human family redefined what it meant to be human itself. It pushed our lineage back by more than 1,000,000 years, placing this modest creature at the root of our story. The argument was clear. The birth of technology was the birth of humanity. So what did this hominin look like? Meeting Homo habilis, you'd see its transitional nature immediately. Its brain was around 600 cubic centimeters, about 30% larger than Australopithecines, but less than half the size of ours. Its face projected less. Its jaws and teeth were reduced, hinting at a diet shift, perhaps more meat, or perhaps using tools to process food instead of relying only on powerful jaws. Yet from the neck down, much of the body still resembled its ancestors, long arms built for climbing, and likely a habit of sleeping in trees to avoid predators. According to current evidence, Homo habilis lived between 2.4 and 1.4 million years ago. It wasn't alone, sharing Africa with late Australopithecines and eventually early Homo erectus. It was a crowded, competitive world. Homo habilis was a bridge species, a mosaic of old and new, small-bodied, still climbing, still vulnerable, yet stepping into a new era shaped by intelligence and technology, one sharp stone flake at a time, the older one toolkit, dawn of technology. To grasp the world of Homo habilis, you must understand its tools. Forget the image of elaborate spears or axes. These were humble but revolutionary. Archaeologists call them the Oldowan industry, named for Olduvai Gorge. These weren't weapons for hunting giants, but practical tools for survival, portable butcher kits for cutting meat, smashing bones, and processing plants. Picture yourself at a dry riverbed 2 million years ago. The toolkit could be recreated with 3 simple steps. First, pick up a hard, dense stone that fits in your palm, your hammerstone. Second, find a softer stone like lava or flint, your core. The rest of the story begins with the spark of an idea. Strike, shape, and create something entirely new.